Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. जय बोलो सीताराम की, जय बोलो राधे श्याम की. श्री राम जय जय राम. श्री श्याम जय जय श्याम. ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय. ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय. ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय. ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय. ॐ नमो नारायणाय. ॐ नमो नारायणाय. ॐ नमो नारायणाय. ॐ नमो नारायणाय. कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं. श्रीकृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं. श्रीकृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम्. On this Guruvara or Thursday, Brihaspatiwara, we are occurring. I warmly welcome to you to the 4th episode of mEs-sage and mEs-sage. Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum means I bow down to the principle of attractiveness that I am as the teacher of the entire universe. So my own conscience or consciousness in its attractive principle is what I call as Krishna, and to that attractiveness of mine I bow down as it is the teacher to the entire universe. Today is the Falguni Masa, Shukla Paksha, Panchami Tithi. On this Guruvara day, we celebrate the brahm-ōtsavam. It's actually a 10-day festival, but today is the peak of the brahm-ōtsavam festival of a temple in the neighborhood of the Indian Institute of Science, India's topmost university, where I've had the privilege of being associated with for the last, let's see, oh my goodness, 29 years. At the risk of revealing my age, I need to say this is pretty much like 58% of my life that I've been associated with IISc, with of course breaks here and there. Truly speaking, about a quarter century that I've been associated with them, first as a student, as a postdoctoral fellow, and then as a faculty member in the aerospace department. The very neighborhood of that IISc is a beautiful, spiritual, ethereal, and religiously bubbling locality called Malléśwaram. And there is a temple of Sri vénu-gōpāla Swami, established in 1902. So that's about, yes, 119 years back. But well, the Malléśwaram locality itself is about 400 years old and is named after a much more ancient temple there in the 17th century, that is in the 1600s, established by the Marathas as descendant of Shivaji Maharaj, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, the Kadu Malléśwara temple. Kadu means forest, Malla or Mallika means jasmine, as in Mallikarjuna. Arjuna is also whitishness or a medicinal tree which enables purity of the body, mind, and intellect. And Mallikarjuna means somebody who's as white as jasmine flower. Malligai poo pola vellai. And there are a lot of Tamilians and Kannadigas of the religious bent of mind who live in this particular locality of Malléśwaram, including many of my colleagues, especially the senior ones. A lot of them who have retired live in this particular locality. So the Kadu Malléśwara temple is the one which gives the name to the locality of Malléśwaram. And 300 years after the establishment of the Kadu Malléśwara temple, the Iyengars of the area were looking at establishing a Krishna temple as well, according to the Vishishtadvaita parampara of Sri Ramanujacharya. As you know, there are many different pathways to the one truth, and of them the popular ones are those brought back into fashion from the Vedic times about 1,000 years ago or more by Adi Shankaracharya, the Advaita or non-duality. Dvaita or duality by Madhvacharya, and in between these two, both in terms of the philosophical understanding as well as in terms of the time period of their occurrence, it was Sri Ramanujacharya's qualified non-dualism or Vishishta Advaita. It is Advaita, but it is Vishishta Advaita. To put it in very simple terms, Advaita means that I am God, everything around me is God. It is so right now and will be so forever. It has been so forever as well. Whereas the Dvaita principle says that all of us are one and the same, but God is different, and therefore there is a duality, I and God, or God and I, and it remains so forever. It has remained so, does remain so right now, and will remain so. The Vishishta Advaita, of course there are many complications to this, not go into the details of that, but essentially says that as of now God and I are different, but going forward will be one and the same. So this principle emanating from Sri Perumbudur's birth of Ramanujacharya and his early life in the Srirangam temple of Tamil Nadu and later life in Karnataka's Melkote, amazingly beautiful temple on the way from Bengaluru to Mysuru, very close to Mysuru. Melkote, or the higher fort, about which I've written quite a few articles in katham.in. You're most welcome to look through them. But the reason why I'm mentioning all of them in the context of the Sri vénu-gōpāla krśña-swāmi temple of Malléśwaram, Bengaluru, is the fact that the Iyengars of the area established it in the same paradigm of Vishishtadvaita of Ramanujacharya, and especially some of the practices of the Melkote temple you can see being followed quite strictly in the Sri vénu-gōpāla krśña-swāmi temple of Malléśwaram as well. An ethereal temple. I've had the privilege of being in it many a times. About 20 years ago, I used to go there almost at least once a week and enjoy being in the energy field created by that temple, because it's actually a rehabilitation house for vigrahas. Why do I call it a rehabilitation house? Because almost all the vigrahas over there are many powerful, tiny vigrahas in different enclosures in the temple complex. It's pretty big, 250 feet by about 140 feet. And it's an entire block, so there are 4 streets around it. And the reason why I call it a rehabilitation house is that all of these vigrahas were obtained from various parts of southern Bharat, including Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. Many in the custody of the Mysore Maharaja, who is the one who donated the land for this temple as well, just like he donated the land for the Indian Institute of Science campus as well. And it's the people of the Malléśwaram locality who put in almost 3 or 4 times the money, initial money given by the Mysore Maharaja to construct this temple. But in terms of where to get the vigrahas from, the Iyengars very, very intelligently decided, instead of making something totally anew, they said there's so many unfortunately mishandled and ruined temples around the country. Remember, it was under the British East India rule at that point of time. Things haven't improved much in the 74 years after independence either, unfortunately. Temples still remain in the hands of the government departments, and many wonderful ones are in ruins. And it was so in the latter half of the 18th century, 19th century as well. And in 1902, when this temple was established, it was established along with the vigrahas, which were not being worshipped in many ancient, powerful, consecrated spaces of Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. So those vigrahas, with the rightful permissions of the Mysore Maharaja, were brought to this temple at Malléśwaram and consecrated. So you can really see the power behind these ancient consecrations, even though the temple is only about 119 years old. I say only about a century old because unlike places of worship of many other religions which are pretty young, the Sanatana Dharma places of worship are all typically millennia old, if not more. They in fact go in parallel with the very advent of a species called human beings, or the Homo sapiens. That's why we call it Sanatana Dharma, or the eternal principle of righteousness, or the eternal nature, or the eternal characteristic, or the very way of life. So the powerhouse that these consecrated vigrahas, which means vigraha, vi is vishesha, special, and graha is consumer. We refer to the planetary bodies Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, apart from the Sun, Moon, Rahu, and Ketu, the northern and southern nodes of the path of the moon around the earth, intersecting the path of the earth around the sun. These 9 as the grahas or consumers. Now we call what is consecrated within temples not as idols, which is the unfortunate word that translators often use, but it's not an idol. It is a vigraha or a murti, which have absolutely no equivalents in English. The nearest we can say is that it is a special consumer, vigraha, vishesha graha. That means, unlike all others which are normal consumers, these are special consumers. That means they're capable of consuming either nothing or everything, as the need might be at different times of rituals at these temples, and the need of the devotees might be. Devotees who come there not to pray, as in the Western's way of looking at it, either a requesting prayer or a thanksgiving prayer. No, we do invocations. We recognize that we are the creators of God in his or her various forms out of our own prana. And that's why we have done to these vigrahas what is known as prana pratishtana. That is, we have imbibed our own prana, about which I talked in a little more detail in yesterday's episode. Apart from ojas and tejas, we have prana, which is basically an ethereal version of our own air and space elements. That prana or life force or life energy we have breathed in to these special consumers, vigrahas or murtis. And that's how they have so much of power. And this has been done not by our generation, but by many generations before, not only since the temple was established, but even much before, because these murtis, as I already told you, are from much more ancient temples of Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, gracefully resurrected and brought here because they were in ruins, both the temples as well as the vigrahas. People who didn't know the value of these had left it to waste, but it was brought here to what I call as a rehabilitation house, Sri vénu-gōpāla krśña-swāmi Devasthana Mandir or temple. And not only consecrated in the traditional sense of Vishishta Dvaita, but also the Pancharatra Agama. The Pancharatra Agama or agamas are sciences of temple architecture and consecration over and beyond the Vedas. So it's a combination of those two which has made this particular temple very, very powerful. And you can actually feel it. Those of the IISc students or faculty listening to this discourse, if you haven't been there, you've missed quite a bit. Please do so at your earliest convenience, with, of course, all the COVID-19 precautions of social distancing and masking, or probably after a while. But especially when all of the electric lights are off, it's just the diyas of the temple, the deepas or vilak. Oh, what an amazing sight of that Sri Krishna playing the flute because the flute is of most significance over here, being vénu-gōpāla krśña-swāmi temple. Venu means flute. Of course, Krishna is associated with various other flutes, including Murali, etc. But Venu is very special because it represents every one of the biological entities, all the way from amoeba to the Homo sapien. Each of these biological entities, even in the theory of relativity, modern physics, leave alone metaphysics, is actually like a flute. By itself, the flute is just a piece of bamboo with holes, of course at the appropriate places. But once in the hands of a flautist, a trained flautist, it can do wonders, magic. The same way, whether it's the body of a plant, tree, animal, or a human being, by itself, yes, it's amazingly complicated system, but without life, it is a dead body, worth burying or burning, not of much other use. But once life comes into these biological entities, that's when one recognizes that the music, the symphony, the play, the opera of Krishna Leela has begun. Krishna playing the flute is our own consciousness in its attractive form, playing our physical body through prana, blown into the flute. The breath of our own consciousness's attractive form, flowing through this body, through inhalation and exhalation and all that happens in between. Again, between exhalation and inhalation, there's so much that happens. And all of this is the game of life, the wonderful Krishna Leela that opens up for the benefit of all. So that Sri vénu-gōpāla krśña-swāmi is celebrating his brahm-ōtsavam, that is the festivity of creativity. Brahma is our own creative nature, and Utsava is our own celebrative spirit, represented by Parvati, Parvati, who is said to be the sibling of Krishna, our own conscious, attractive principle. So this is a wonderful opportunity to look into our own Anahata Chakra, which is where the principle of Sri Lakshmi Narayana or Sita Rama or Radhe Krishna or Rukmini Krishna resides. This I'm mentioning Rukmini because the Vigraha of Rukmini Tayar at the Sri vénu-gōpāla krśña-swāmi temple is also an amazing one, which is definitely not to be missed out. Then, in the Anahata Chakra, which is the embodiment of our own loving and attractive nature, is where the real vénu-gōpāla krśña-swāmi is. I've talked about the Venu as the physical bodies of all the biological entities. The next word there is Go. I'm not saying Gopala because Pala I'll come to later. Go. What is Go? Most people recognize it as a cow, perhaps the English word cow. came from the same root, Sanskrit root of go. So, the Gopala is the one who takes care of the cow. But the word go is far more deeper if you look into the Yajurveda and even the Rig Veda. There are many other synonyms which are given for go. And one of those synonyms is aditi. And it's not different from our understanding that go is cow. Because what aditi means is one without the other, non-dual. It's the same root from which Advaita comes as well. Aditi. Diti means duality or plurality, and aditi means that which is not dual, it is one. And that principle of aditi or indivisibility is what the cow represents. And that's why we hold the cow as so holy and not to be butchered around for beef, because the cow is a symbolism of that principle of indivisible non-duality. Once you break open a cow, either for eating or for leather or whatever you want, you have lost your touch with that principle of non-duality as well. Because that was the very basic, fundamental symbol of Advaita or Aditi, non-duality, indivisible nature. And once you have started dividing the indivisible, you have lost the plot. Remember, this is all a play that we are in, a Leela. And you have lost the Krishna Leela. You are just an outcast from the play. Somebody who is just doing a mess on the stage and spoiling the whole play, rather than being a part of it, enjoying himself or herself, and also entertaining the rest of the characters playing the play. For there's no audience other than those who are on stage themselves, who relish each other. Because everybody, every biological entity, not only all the human beings, but every other creature is on the stage, and so is the go or the cow, representing indivisibility. Now you have changed the very character of that if you're butchering it for any purpose whatsoever. So that's the significance of Gopāla. Pala is the one who takes care, who protects. And therefore, that is another epithet for our own consciousness's attractive principle of Krishna. That yes, if we have a conscience, with that consciousness, we protect the indivisible and retain its nature as indivisible, not make it divisible. And that's something which unscientific people will never understand, because what is over here in the Anahata Chakra is the real science of biology, and what exists beyond that, either in the Vishuddhi, Agnya or Sahasrara, is what psychology is trying to approach. Psychology is essentially a sublimated form of biology. So to understand psychology properly, you need to understand biology properly. If the biological theory is not established appropriately at the Anahata Chakra, the psychological theories go for a toss. But for the biological theory itself to be established, remember there are other chakras below which are foundational to biology. If you want to understand psychology, you need to understand biology well first. If you need to understand biology well, then you need to understand what is at the Manipura chakra, the chemistry. Only then the connectivity between them, the biochemistry link gets established. So the chemistry at the Manipura chakra of Swami Sharanamayappa is so very significant. But if you want to establish your understanding of chemistry well, that is the Manipura chakra, then you should have already established further below at the Swadhisthana chakra what is considered to be the realm of physics. Without a proper understanding of physics, you cannot understand chemistry, and therefore you cannot understand biology, and therefore you cannot understand psychology or spirituality. So, the basis for that is physics. But you know the amount of change that physics has undergone over the last century or a little more? It's amazing. And we have lost touch with that. So we are still based on the classical Newtonian mechanics as the physics. No, there's quantum mechanics and relativistic mechanics and lot more that modern physics has to offer in terms of dark energy and dark matter. Unless you understand all of that with the Muruga Tattva at the Swadhisthana, you cannot move to chemistry, you cannot move to biology, you cannot move to psychology. All of your understanding of psychology, biology, and chemistry would be outdated and a waste if you do not understand modern physics, relativity, and quantum mechanics principles. And the basis for the physics is the fundamental science which Muruga's brother Ganesha takes care at the Mooladhara chakra. At the Mooladhara chakra, in the base of our spine, between our genitals and our excretory organ, the anus, is the location where you have mathematics. And it's out of mathematics, the fundamental Ganatantra taken care of by Ganesha, the Lord of all categories, the Lord of numbers. Only by appropriate understanding of mathematics can you understand physics, chemistry, biology, and of course, psychology and spirituality. So the truly scientific are the ones who can be truly spiritual as well. But very unfortunately, our understanding of science borrowed back from a rebound from the West, going from Bharat and coming back to us in a form that is completely changed. We tend to misunderstand everything and think of science and spirituality as opposing each other. But if you look at the topmost scientists anywhere in the world, they're all from a spiritual background, and many of them highly religious too. And then the mysticism of the snake, where you give predominance to perception over the scripture. What you perceive, what I perceive experientially is far, far more important, my dear friend, than anything that the scriptures might say. Scripture is for validation. It's important. Very, very important. Never to put it down. But even more important than the scripture, even the Vedas, is our own experiential perception, not through these eyes, which is why I keep them closed during this entire series of massage and message. Thanks to many of you well-wishers who have pointed out that I keep my eyes closed. But yes, I have two other series ongoing in parallel these days. One is Srimati Vasanta Kumari Sampath's channel, my beloved Vasanti Ma Mother's channel of Carnatic music. as well as the nonlinear mechanics of composite structures on katham.in. Both of these I'm doing with my physical eyes open, but this one I would like to keep my physical eyes closed during these discourses and keep only my intuitive eye that you see in the symbolic form of the tilak over here of the sandal paste with its amazing fragrance. That intuitive knowledge experientially gained is what I would like to share with you as part of this series of massage in my wonderful Japanese massage chair, along with amazing automatic controls over here. And you can see the reflection of the iPhone 12 Pro Max 512 GB right in it. So thanks, dear friends, for your thoughtful suggestion that I should open my eyes once in a while, but do excuse me, because when I'm talking about the ultimate truths of intuitive experience, the perception which is symbolized by the snake and its mystical nature, is far more important for me than the scriptures. Always come back and test the experience or the perception, which keeps getting deeper and deeper with the scriptures. But the scriptures alone would become bookish knowledge. As I said, we don't even call our scriptures as books. They're just sounds. And in fact, we call them, even when they are written, which they have been in the last few centuries, we call them as grantha or volumes rather than as books or pustak. We don't call the Vedas or Gita or Mahabharat or the other Itihasa, Ramayana, or any of the 18 Puranas, or the various parts of the Vedas like the Brahmanas, Aranyakas, Samhitas, and the Upanishads of the Vedanta. None of them are called as books. They're all part of what is known as the Grantha. And the Vedas, of course, are the Shruti, that which is listened to and comes to us through intuition. So even the Vedas themselves contain only what was perceived by the seers. We call them seers. Rishis literally means seers. Maharishis or great seers who saw through all of this clutter of materialism, the real truth which lasts, not the temporary materialistic existence, but the spiritual reality which never had a birth, never had a death, will never have a death, and is the only thing which exists even now according to Advaitic traditions. So that reality is what they saw and perceived, which we now call as the Vedas. So what is understood as the Vedas was actually once upon a time a perception of the Maharishis. But the same perception you and I and all of us, not just human beings, but all living entities can have if we only strive for it, if we put the right efforts towards it, either through Jnana Yoga, through Raja Yoga, through Karma Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. Doesn't matter what combinations of these you take up in your Sankhya Yoga practice. But every one of them, the ultimate is to have that inner perception deepening further and further to all inclusivity. And then you become the Vedas. You don't read the Vedas as a book separate from you or hear the Vedas as a sound separate from you. You become that vibration of that sound of the Dhamru, of Garuda's flapping wings, the Vedas. That's what you are. Tat Tvam Asi. I am Atma Brahma. Aham Brahmasmi. And that's why this guy snake is associated with all of these levels that we have talked so far. Remember, in the first episode, I gave you a briefing of all the chakras. Then in the second episode, we saw some of the chakras, namely the Agnya and the Swadhisthana, bringing in a connectivity between Kukke Subramanya and Horanadu Annapurneshwari. And in the third episode, when I was talking to you about Vinayaki Chaturthi, I went back to the Mooladhara chakra. I'm keeping the energy or vibration, which is the dominant mode of the day, in mind, the eigen mode of the day in mind, while coming up with relevant talks, because otherwise it's an ocean, and even 512 GB of my iPhone would not be enough to record that kind of a video. I would go on forever. So let's focus on it. So now, in today's discourse on the Panchami, which is the fourth discourse, we have come to the fourth chakra, which is the Anahata chakra at the heart, and that's also having a snake connection. Yes, you know it right. Adi Ananta Shesha, on which our own everythingness reclines, the 0-1 infinity on which our own everythingness reclines. If you look at, so without that snake connection, all the way up to Sahasrara, where the Vasuki snake is around the neck of our own nothingness. So that's mysticism is required there. That means one's own intuitive perception is required there. One's own intuitive perception becomes the mattress over here. One's own intuitive perception, in the case of Ayyappa, becomes the Sabarimala over here, which is the environment in which one lives. That is, the satsanga is what we are talking about, because the Sabarimala is infested with snakes. We say infested when we think of snakes as those which trouble us, but when we see snakes as symbolism of mysticism or our own intuitive perception, we see that all of those snakes are our co-seekers, which are basically creating that satsanga, or a sangha with satya, or the truth. And if you go further, you look at the Swadhisthana chakra, Muruga is represented in the form of the snake. I already told you about it when we discussed Kukke Subramanya. In whole of Karnataka, you actually represent Saravanabhava, Kartikeya, Muruga in the form of a snake, along with Vasuki and Shesha. Vasuki and Shesha are his companions always, but Subramanya himself, the very principle, is represented by snake, because Subramanya or Muruga, the teacher of his own dad, was actually a person who was mystical in nature. The Muruga Tattva there is a huge rahasya or secret involved in the whole thing. And then when you go to the Swadhisthana chakra, I already told you when I was talking about Namah Shivaya, that Na stands for Ganesha's other name of Nagaraja Yajñopavita. What is Nagaraja Yajñopavita? Naga is the cobra. The king of cobras is Nagaraja, which means the king of perception, the ultimate ability to perceive. Now, with that kind of royal perception of the truth, of the reality, if you put that as your Yajñopavita, or the sacred thread, then you become one with the concept of Ganesha. That means you have mastered mathematics. When your mystical perception is worn as your responsibility over your left shoulder, going all the way to the right hip. So you have taken the ultimate responsibility of mathematics. Yes. Once you have done that, you turn into that mystical perception yourself. That is the Muruga Tattva, or you become one with physics. Then you go a little further and extract out of that physics a good company of the other snakes other mystical perceivers, other true seekers and seers. The word seeker and seer is so close to each other, remember? All that you have to do as a sadhak is to remove the K in the seeker and make it a seer. So you have moved from a sadhak to a rishi. And that is possible in a much quicker way if you have the company of your fellow seekers. And of course, those who are beyond you, your mentors and your gurus. And that's essentially what the Dharmashastra Manikanta Swami Sharanamayappa does in his abode of snakes, Sabrimala, full of such snakes, full of such mystics, siddhas. And then we go further up and come to from where Parashurama established a Dharma Shastra Kshetra to Parashurama's original form of Vishnu and his other form of Krishna. On the Kalinga, he dances, and on the Adishesha, Anantashesha, he reclines. And that's again showcasing the fact that if you have done good in maths, physics, and chemistry, that is MPC, you can only then do really well in biology. Without a proper understanding of modern math, the state-of-the-art techniques, modern physics, the current cutting-edge physics, and the chemistry which flows out of it, the biochemistry, and then you come to biology. Then you understand biology appropriately. Otherwise, it's long outdated biology. And that's why allopathy fails so miserably except in emergency situations. Ayurveda has this holistic approach of taking into account math, physics, and chemistry in moving forward to your biology. And then with that holistic nature, the biology understanding is far more deeper. To recognize that we are not just physical entities made out of trillions of cells, but each one of those cells is a living being, and we are actually a community housing so many living entities, the cells, some of which actually are so-called human cells, but many others which are microorganisms as well. They all make up to be who we really are, and even in the physical sense, leave alone the metaphysical sense. So unless the biologist or the medical practitioner understands these things, the treatment is going to be superficial at the surface level, only a diagnosis, and maybe in emergency situation it helps. But for diseases which are chronic in nature, which are self-made, out of self-help, you will not be able to treat them. So to be able to treat them as well, you need to go back and understand not your school textbook math, physics, and chemistry. Even if you're bad in it, don't worry, because that was not really the real math, physics, and chemistry according to current levels of understanding. So you don't need to go into the details, but at least the basic principles of this, if you understand, then you can understand that we are not these cells in a physical sense, but the cells themselves are not physical. They're made out of atomic and subatomic particles going all the way to the Higgs boson or the God particle, which is actually nothing but a vibration. So the vibes are important. We are energy, and energy and matter keep interchanging with each other. And what we really see with these eyes, the physical eyes, is not the truth. And that's why I keep them closed and see through my intuitive vision and share that intuitive vision with you. So if it hurts some of you that I'm closing my eyes while giving these discourses, I'm sorry. This is the USP of this particular series, because I want to convey my intuitive experience gained through years of sadhana, through dhyana, and that I want to pour out to you. I don't know how long I would exist in this physical body and when this would give up on me, but these videos hopefully will remain for much longer, and those who hear it will keep correlating with it and also transmitting it to the others after their own experience with it. And that's what is the essential takeaway from all these. So I would prefer to keep my eyes closed. So forgive me, those of you who thought that it would be disrespectful to the audience. There's nothing to be disrespectful of the audience, because I never consider the audience as separate from me. There's a sense of belongingness or all inclusivity in which I see you as me and me as you. So in that sense, there is no way we can be distinguished from each other. And there's no way we can be disrespecting either you disrespecting me or me disrespecting you is never possible, because we are one and the same, like the go in the vénu-gōpāla krśña-swāmi temple. So once again, with a prayer to Sri vénu-gōpāla krśña-swāmi, I conclude today's episode, the 4th episode of mAs-sage and mEs-sage. Thank you very much for your patient listening. And these are things that will be of great help to you as you deepen your own sadhanas to see things as they are, like the mystical snake does. At each one of these 4 levels, Muladhara, we saw Nagaraja Yajñopavita. At Swadhisthana, we saw Subramanya himself in the form of a snake. And then we saw, you see Naga Pratishtas in so many temples, especially of Karnataka, but also Tamil Nadu, Kerala and Andhra, where the Kundalini Shakti, Ida Pingala, is established in the form of coiled snakes, the Sushumna Nadi as a single snake, and Rahu Ketu, of course, which can never be separated from each other in spite of the Mohini avatars, Sudarshana Chakra chopping them off. They remain alive. That's the head and the tail, which is nothing but the metaphysical non-existence of that mystical nature. So finally, we have seen also, apart from the Ganesha and Subramanya principles, the Ayyappa principle of satsang, the Dharma Shastra, Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami, Sangam Sharanam Gacchami. So Dharma and Sangha are company of the good or the righteous, or those who are living to the true nature of what one is. That's essential. And that's the company of snakes at Sabarimala. And finally, Adi Anantasesha or Kalinga Nartana Krishna. And of course, Sri vénu-gōpāla krśña-swāmi and his beautiful flute. Thank you. Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Govindam Bhaja Mudamate, Samprapte Sannihite Kale, Samprapte Sannihite Kale, Nahi nahi rakshati Dukrung Karane, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Govindam Bhaja Mudamate. Venkatesh Perumal Govinda, Govinda, Yermayandavan Govinda, Govinda, Tirupati Nivasan Govinda, Govinda, Saptagirinathan Govinda, Govinda, Kuladevam Govinda, Govinda, Sri Venkatachalapati Govinda, Govinda, Sri Venkataramana Govinda, 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 Govinda. Shri Kadu Malléśwara Sameta Shri Malléśwara Shri vénu-gōpāla krśña-swāmine Namo Namaha. Jai Jai Radha Raman Hari Bol. Jai Jai Radha Raman Hari Bol. Jai Shri Krishna.